Hi, this is Len Edgerly. Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles podcast. I'm running a little late today. This is the latest I've done an interview, I think, for as long as I can remember. I spoke with Noah Smith, who is a Bloomberg opinion writer and the author of the Noahpinion blog and newsletter, at 5 o'clock today. Reached him in California. Got the interview set up in the middle of the night a couple of nights ago and talking to Noah on Twitter, so I was really glad to get him booked. But Podcast Mountain had quite a steep ascent here toward the end of the day, and I just finished up making notes on what I want to talk to you in addition to the interview. So I will jump in. I'm already past time of freeing up the bedroom, so Darlene and Deb are watching TV out in the other room, and I want to get the show to you as soon as possible. I really enjoyed my interview with Noah, and I hope you will too. I have a couple of news items I would like to pass along to you. I was late getting to an innovative new product launch. It's called Day One Editions that Amazon announced earlier this week. But I've checked it out, and I have been excited enough to pre-order all three of these potential new devices. So the way this works is it's kind of an extension of the Day One products that were first launched in September of last year when I was at a product preview in Seattle. That's when we got the Echo Frames, the Echo Loop, the Echo Buds. But they had already been established as products, and they were being offered to see how sales would go. And I think it was the Echo Loop that was discontinued. The Frames went on, was successful. They've moved the whole product creation process even further upstream, if you will, with these Day One edition products, because what they're saying is we have three possible products and they won't even make them unless they get enough pre-orders, if they meet a certain goal for these three products. So you have a chance by pre-ordering to say, yeah, I really like that product, but not so much that one. So I ordered all three, of course, and what happens is if the pre-orders by March 19th at 8:59 a.m. Pacific time, however pre-orders there are by that date determines on which of these three products will be made. Now, it looks like one of them is definitely going to be made. The other two, maybe not. In order, Smart Cuckoo Clock for $80. These all work with Alexa. I'm a sucker for cuckoo clocks, I guess you'd call it. We had one in the kitchen in Cambridge at my parents' old house, and it was an old Swiss cuckoo clock. Well, this is a real modern Alexa-type cuckoo clock, and it chimes and it does all the things. It also does the timer clock things, which I really like in the earlier Echo clock, which is just a simple round clock, but this thing's got a little more style to it, and why not? It's currently at 35% of the pre-order goal since February 17th, so it's hard to say whether that one's going to be made or not. All three of these, if they are made, will be shipped between July and September. The next one is the Smart Nutrition Scale, $35. It's also at 39% of the pre-order goal has been met. It also pairs to an Echo device. And as an example on what you can do with it, you have it set up. You put a bowl of blueberries on the scale, and then you say, Alexa, ask Smart Scale how much sugar is in these blueberries. And there'll be a calculation based on how many ounces of blueberries you put there, and you've told Alexa what they are, and then you can get some information on sugar, calories, or carbs, it looks like. That's intriguing to me. We do have a kitchen scale. We use it. And when I told Darlene about this, I tried all three of them out on her. I think I saw some cautious, skeptical interest in that one. The one that is pretty clearly going to be made because it's at 99% of the pre-order goal is called Smart Sticky Note Printer for $90. The way this works is it's like a black box, 4.7 by 4.7 by 3.2 inches. It weighs 20 ounces, and it has a sticky note roll that can curl out of it. So you would have this on your kitchen or desk, and you'd say, Alexa, print a note, ship package to Kelly. And then this little box would spit out a sticky note with that actually kind of typed on it, printed on it. So, a lot of I think the effectiveness of Post-it notes is the fact that you write them by hand, but maybe they'll have a little more authority if you can actually print one out. I think this is fun, clever marketing. It's sort of branding Amazon for its innovation and these day one teams. I think I'd love to see, the next 5 products that they decided not to try releasing, because there's a fair amount of latitude and creativity that's going into these, and I like it. I enjoy it. I first heard about this from Garrett Riley because he sent me a text and he said something about I ordered the sticky note printer and the Cuckoo clock, and I had no idea what he was talking about. I said I gotta follow up with him and find out what that was about. And before I had a chance to close the loop, I got an email from Dan. And he wrote, "Hi, Len, I'm sure you probably received this message from Amazon as well. In case you overlooked it, I want to forward it to you. I'm excited about the Cuckoo clock, and the Post-it printer looks interesting. I've submitted orders for both, and fingers crossed they get built. They look like fun gadgets to experiment with. Take care, Dan." So thanks to Dan and Garrett for alerting me to this product rollout, which, boy, I'd hate to think I might have missed this, an Alexa Cuckoo clock. That's kind of a must-have. Second item in the New York Times Deal Book newsletter. This is written by Jonathan A. Nee, Knee. They're talking about Colin Breyer and Bill Carr's new book, which is now out, titled Working Backwards, Insights, Stories, and Secrets from Inside Amazon. They say it's more like an authorized corporate profile than a tell-all. Breyer was a shadow for Bezos when Kindle and AWS were getting started, and Carr started and ran Prime Video. I bought the book. I haven't read it. I'll admit to being a little bit miffed when I reached out to invite both or one of the authors on the show. I was politely rebuffed by the publisher's publicist. So, my interest in this book is a little tepid, I'd have to say. But I have read stories about the book, and in this one, in the New York Times column, was something I hadn't seen before, and I'll pass it along to you because I think it's pretty interesting. They talk about ways of thinking and speaking that are distinctively Jeffian and therefore Amazonian. This is a question in the culture of the company that has to do with the fact that Bezos is going to step aside as CEO in July. And so how much of what he has inculcated at Amazon is really just going to continue, or does it leave with him? It might be that you would think it could leave with him with this anecdote. It has to do with how Jeff analyzes the famous 6-page memos which are presented at the start of meetings when Amazon is considering a new project. They write, "Jeff has an uncanny ability to read a narrative and consistently arrive at insights that no one else did, even though we were all reading the same narrative. After one meeting, I asked him how he was able to do that. He responded with a simple and useful tip that I have not forgotten. He assumes each sentence he reads is wrong unless he can prove otherwise." Think about that. So he's taking a very active, skeptical approach to these memos, and he's accepting the validity of that only if he can prove that it's not wrong. That's kind of zen, but an interesting and intriguing insight into the way that Jeff Bezos thinks, which is perhaps embedded in Amazon and perhaps not. For the tech tip, I want to talk about a product which is not an Amazon product. It's by Apple, and it is called AirPods Max. It's basically headphones that have a microphone built in. If you think of the AirPods Pro, the little AirPods that you use, they do everything the same, but they have the great big comfortable headphones that go over the ears, and very ergonomically designed in a fancy carrying case. Just knock your socks off audio. It's a buttery soft sound when you're wearing them and listening to a podcast or anything else. Now, the crazy thing about this product is what it costs. It's $549. I really went back and forth a month ago when I put my order in for it, but it is an entirely different kind of headset, and I've thought it might be helpful for Darlene's sister Deb, because she, in her work here while we've been in Florida, she's on the phone most of the day. She does professional testimony at Social Security hearings from all over the country, and she has some hearing issues. So these headphones could conceivably be really helpful to her. I'm going to try them out and see if she thinks that they might be worthwhile. For the rest of us, is it worth the money? Hard to say. I think that this is some kind of a precursor to what Apple may be working on AR, VR glasses, moving in that direction. Some of this technology might have been tested in these headphones, and it's as Apple just keeps working on wearable technology, I think this is a path in that direction. I sat in for an hour-long meeting this morning wearing them, and I was surprised because about halfway through, I sort of forgot I had these headphones on. And I've got some Sony headphones that I use when I'm editing the podcast, and I can't wear them for more than 5 or 10 minutes before I just have to, slide them down so that they're around my neck. They're just too tight. It's not comfortable. But these new AirPods Max are comfortable, and they do all kinds. There's some kinds of movies which will have surround all around you. You'll be hearing things behind your head as well as in front of your head, and they are remarkable. It's another amazing feat of Apple engineering and kind of Steve Jobsian design. Time now for the interview. Noah Smith was working on a PhD degree in economics at the University of Michigan when he began blogging in late 2010. Since then, his incisive writing about society and economics has earned him a perch at Bloomberg as an opinion columnist, and his Noahpinion blog is now distributed via Substack as a newsletter. I first heard about Noah in a glowing recommendation which he received from Wired co-founder Kevin Kelly on the Recommendo newsletter. That led me to check out Noahpinion and to sign up for a paid subscription. I chose the annual rate of $100 a year. He is a prolific writer, so it's been a good investment so far, and highly original analysis of everything from cancel culture to how Texas is handling the frigid weather. I crossed electronic paths with Noah the other night on Twitter, and he graciously agreed to come on the show on short notice. That led to tonight's conversation between his home in California. I'm pretty sure it's California. I know it's on the West Coast. And here in Sanibel by Zoom. I began by asking if his initial blogging was focused mainly on understanding the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009.
To be honest, I didn't really think of it that way. I just wanted to think about economics out loud. Mm-hmm. People I admired, like Brad DeLong, had blogs. I just wanted to sort of get my thoughts down. And I didn't really expect anyone to read it. But then Mark Toma, who at that time was this guy who would just go through the entire blogosphere every day and post a comprehensive list of links, he linked to me, and then Brad DeLong linked to me, and then Paul Krugman linked to me. And through Paul Krugman, I became a very well-known blogger because, Paul Krugman's well-read.
Yeah, for sure. How did you come up with that great name, Noahpinion?
Well, it was going to be No Employment.
Why was it going to be no employment?
No, because I'm just kidding.
Oh,
because of course, every grad student is afraid of not getting a job.
Right.
No, it's or possibly no apparent reason. There's infinite puns that you can make, but I'm not good at making names for things. And when I do find a good name, I've got to really hold on to it and milk it for all it's worth, because I'm not going to come up with another.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great one, because what attracted me to your writing after the tout from Kevin Kelly was, I guess it's sort of clear where you probably fall on the left-right spectrum, but you're usually digging into things in a way that mixes up what people think they think about something, so that it's not that you have no opinions, but perhaps they're kind of unpredictable opinions.
Yes, that is exactly right. And originally, I mean, the idea was that there's a lot of topics on which I'm willing to say I don't really know the answer. I don't really have a good answer. So, yes, I have opinions, but I'm willing to have no opinion.
Yeah.
When necessary. But I'm glad you've been liking it. It was really nice of Kevin to give me that shout out. Actually, I got 3,000 email subscribers in a single day from that recommendation. It was impressive.
Well, I mean, he's when he recommends something, it's just solid gold in my view. I mean, he's and then it was confirmed very quickly just reading a couple of them, and I instantly opted for the annual subscription and all. So that was. Did you know that was coming, or did you just wake up and find out that Kevin had given you a pretty strong recommendation?
Well, no, actually, I woke up and saw that thousands of people had joined my email list, and I thought, oh my God, it's a bot attack. The Chinese government is mad at me, and they've sicked thousands of bots on me. And then I saw people tweeting that they had just subscribed to the blog.
Yeah.
So far, I've been unpaywalling most posts. Mm-hmm. So I've been only paywalling maybe 1 out of 7. So my subscribers are considerably less than my email list. But in the future, I'm going to paywall more posts and encourage people to do paying subscription. Yeah. But not so. I don't know, something like only 60 people did paying subscriptions, but then there were 3,000 signups for the email, and I thought, okay, it's got to be bots. But then I checked, and it was just one recommendation from Kevin.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, you started the blog. You got some audience happening. How did you end up being a Bloomberg opinion columnist, and when did that happen?
Well, okay, so after grad school, I gave academia a try, and I was an assistant finance professor at Stony Brook for a couple of years. And after maybe the first year or so, I really realized that I don't really want to be an academic. But I was thinking of what else to do, and so consulting was one thing. So I explored potentially doing some consulting things. Just being a data scientist is another thing you can always sort of do with basic statistics skills. And then Bloomberg came to me and said, "We'll pay you to write." And I said, "No." But they said, "We'll give you a considerable raise to write and let you work in your pajamas from anywhere in the world." I said, "Okay, well, let's think about that." And was the initial approach that you would be writing opinion pieces as opposed to being like a Bloomberg journalist like Brad Stone or somebody? Absolutely. There was never any chance of me being a journalist. And I don't even consider myself a journalist because I'm not even allowed to quote sources in my pieces.
Because you're a columnist. That's the definition.
That's right. I'm supposed to be my own source, but also because I haven't gone through their program, I don't know how to do things like accuracy and source confidentiality and things like that. So I can't just say blah 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 said this. Yeah. I can quote something that I read. I can block quote a thing, but in terms of me being an accurate faithful sort of representative of what someone said to me in a private conversation, I can't do that. The program's easy to go through. I could go learn how to do it in a day, but I just haven't done it. And so I don't think of myself as a journalist. Right.
Well, you made a fascinating shift over, it sounded like maybe a few years or so, from blogging to Twitter, which means you were taking ideas, things you wanted to say, and instead of putting them into a blog post, you had to break them up. Well, at that time, 140 characters, now 280. How did that transition occur? That was pretty interesting.
That is a really interesting question. So I started using Twitter basically as a chat app. So now instead of email, I could just directly talk to anybody in the world and get their attention. And that was really fun for the first few years of Twitter. Maybe I got on it in 2011. So 2011 through 2013, for just a few years, it was really, really fun. And then Twitter shifted and it became this platform for political warfare. And the real thing that changed that was Gamergate. Do you know what that is?
No, what was that?
So Gamergate is a very stupid thing and complex to describe, but effectively what it was is that a whole bunch of it was like a right-wing, left-wing fight within nerd culture carried out over the medium of Twitter. Initially, it was in forums, but then the forums banned this topic. And Twitter refused to. They didn't ban Gamergate. That was a big mistake, but they were afraid of hurting their business. It was really money. And a lot of good people got driven off Twitter, got made much more cynical. They were targeted. There were extensive campaigns of doxing, if you know what that is, and harassment. It lasted for a year or so until everyone got distracted by the Trump campaign. And all the right-wing people who had been on the instigators of Gamergate became Trump supporters. And then, but it left its mark on Twitter. It left its mark on nerd culture. I feel that nerd culture was very tolerant before that moment and then became extremely fraught and divided. And of course, one of my big theses is that the people on the left won that battle within nerd culture. But then it was extremely bitter, and this subculture of America that I really loved, kind of was riven and ripped apart. But then, even more importantly, Twitter became this platform for political battles. And at the same time, I think the same week that Gamergate started, Michael Brown was killed.
Michael Brown, remind me of that. That's the
Ferguson guy.
Oh, Ferguson. Okay, right. Yep.
And then the Ferguson protests started and Black Lives Matter became a thing. And Black Lives Matter was driven by Twitter hashtag activism. And so then, that made it a lightning rod for, people on the right who opposed it. And so then, of course, we had the Trump campaign. And so our years of unrest were centered around Twitter in a way that they had never been centered around the media before. I mean, we had another wave of unrest in the late 60s and 70s, and that wave was really centered on the streets. You had, of course, we had massive street protests this time, but usually in the 60s and 70s, it was people, bombing some bathroom or, fighting the cops, not just in 1 week, but like all the time, Vietnam War stuff. And now it's Twitter. We've just migrated it. And Twitter seems like a platform that's almost uniquely optimized for divisiveness, for dunking, for denunciations, for lack of understanding. And so, and two things. First of all, at the beginning, no one realized that its potential for this. We were all just using it to talk. And we didn't realize it could be used for this. But also, a specific feature of Twitter made it incredibly useful for this that was invented in 2014, just shortly before Gamergate began, and enabled Gamergate. And that was the quote tweet, which we now know as the dunk.
And how does that work? I know quote tweet, but what is a dunk?
All right, so a dunk is slang for a denunciation.
Okay, I see.
And so... So a quote tweet is when you retweet with a comment. So you have a tweet that someone else writes, and it gets embedded in your own tweet, and then you add text above it.
Okay.
And then that sends it to all your followers. So what happens is basically, if you don't like something that someone wrote, you quote tweet it with some sort of angry or derisive comment, and that directly links all of your followers to the tweet. But they see it out of context, because if someone writes a whole thread or participates in an entire discussion, a quote tweet will only show one tweet. So you take the tweet that you think is the most easy to attack, and then you quote tweet it, and your followers, who are, of course, your fans, your mob, your gang, they only see that one tweet taken out of context, and they can instantly click over to it and leave angry responses and attack the person. So it summons them up.
So what Larry Summers did last night, it wasn't really a dunk because he linked to your whole article. He didn't just take one of your tweets. Is that called something else, or is that in the same kind of family of trouble and divisiveness? What Summers did in response to your column?
That is not. It's really it's qualitatively different and not as bad. That is how people would sort of disagree and attack each other during the days of the blogosphere. But he did include a hashtag, or not hashtag, he included my handle. So if people wanted, they could just tweet to me and say, "Hey, you idiot," Why do you disagree with Summers? That can happen. That didn't happen this time. I've seen it happen before. So it was sort of halfway between normal discussion and a Twitter dunk. But the quote tweet is more powerful than what he did.
Yeah, and more misleading because you can really bend something out of context and do some damage.
Exactly right. And Twitter's refused to alter this in any substantive way, even realizing this, because, again, money.
Because it generates eyeballs and ads, and it just keeps the temperature high, and that's how they make money. Exactly.
People want to be on Twitter so they can fight.
Yeah.
They want to be on Twitter so they can attack, which would be fine if that was all the platform was for. If it was just a place where people who want to flame each other can go flame each other. Flaming just means attacking.
Yeah.
And then that would be fine. But instead, it's also this place where everybody gets their news. And where if you're a journalist or an op-ed writer or something and you need to promote news, you have to be on there because that's, it's just much better than Facebook or Instagram or whatever else you might use. People are trapped there, and politicians and journalists and writers and thinkers and academics are all trapped there, with these hordes of kids who just want to have fun flaming. And that's the problem with Twitter.
I can understand being trapped there. That you can't just sort of walk away. It's like disarming yourself in a consequential exchange of ideas and sort of the work you do. But have you limited your Twitter consumption to certain hours of the day just for your sanity? Or how do you manage the fact that you can't just walk away from this dumpster fire?
I went insane. No, well, I got pet rabbits. Pet rabbits are really the key to managing any problem.
I was going to ask you about that. I see rabbits. Well, how many rabbits do you have?
I have 2.
Yeah.
Cinnamon and Giggles are their names. People are always surprised at how large they are. They're about cat-sized.
Huh.
They're fat. They just eat all day and run around and play. They're really great animals.
They're comfort rabbits.
They're comfort rabbits. They're so great. But then how do I deal with Twitter? So what I do is I block a ridiculous number of people. Anyone who seems like they've arrived at the discussion to intentionally disrupt instead of to engage, I just block. I'm like, nope, there's no reason for you. You showed up to attack. And I think that's what people who are very fixated on the idea of free speech don't necessarily understand. So I think people who study natural rights and ethical philosophy and think about John Locke and whatever, they do understand that my freedom to walk down the street is dependent on your lack of freedom to run up and punch me.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's a trade-off, and that it's not just possible to have everyone just have maximum freedom because people's freedoms interfere with each other. And that's a well-known concept. I mean, I learned that in high school. It's an easy concept, but I don't think the free speech people have really understood that yet at a deep level. The idea that in order for the great mass of people to feel free talking to each other, to feel that they are free to speak their minds, they must feel free from the small number of trolls who will attack them and just try to stop them from speaking their mind at every available opportunity. Freedom relies on that restriction.
Exactly. Well, now I've seen you've discussed, and you're a member of Clubhouse, kind of the new shiny object in this area. It kind of reminds me of when Twitter broke through in 2007 at South by Southwest. I don't know that there's really much of a parallel in predicting how big Clubhouse is going to be, but just as a place for ideas to be engaged with, do you see it as safer inherently because of the setup and the fact it's audio and it's not recorded? I mean, what are the elements that would enable you to compare it as a place to take the kinds of risks that have become problematic on Twitter?
Right. Well, there's a number of features of it. So the first is just that it's the human voice. And the human voice is more humanizing than text. It's very hard to take snippets out of context. I mean, you can do it, but it's just really laborious to do it. The human voice creates understanding between people who would not otherwise have understanding. Second of all, every room is moderated. So Twitter is inherently unmoderated space, but moderated spaces like subreddits or forums, or even Facebook pages inherently have less conflict because the moderator sets the tone. And of course, there's fragmentation there. Twitter is radically open, so conversations are just generated on the fly, and so there can be no assigned moderator. But then Clubhouse, each room has moderators,
right?
And they get to decide who speaks, and et cetera, and they set the tone. And if people want to be if there's a space that people feel is hostile, they can easily leave the space, because in Twitter, the whole thing is one space and you can't leave. People are just in your mentions yelling right in your face all the time. But Clubhouse, you can go from one room to another. Now, I've never encountered a hostile room on Clubhouse, but I'm sure they exist. And another feature is real names. So Clubhouse doesn't force you to have a real name, but it strongly urges you to have a real name. And that may become a problem later when people start disobeying that rule en masse to really attack people. But as for now, the Eternal September, right?
What's that?
So back in the day, Usenet groups would, every September AOL would give out its free internet, and all these random people, no one was on the internet except for geeks, and all these random people would show up and in September and then cancel after a month because they didn't want to pay. And so in September, you'd have the September event where a bunch of randos from this AOL giveaway would just come by these forums and just make a fool of themselves. And so then, but at some point it never stopped because everybody just got the internet. And so it's called the Eternal September event. September never stopped. Everyone's on the internet now. So it could be that Clubhouse will suffer its own Eternal September. And then the magic will be over because everyone will start using pseudonyms in defiance of the policy, and people will just start running into random places. But the moderation will always have an important effect, and the human voice will always have an important effect, I think.
Yeah, the voice aspect is really intriguing to me because I think if somebody has a strong opinion, and I've come across people in my podcast, I have a friend, he's become a friend, an extremely conservative evangelical Christian pastor in Dallas. We disagree on everything, gay marriage, the whole thing, and yet I've had barbecue with him down at South by Southwest. I've talked to him, I've heard him, and because I know the sound of his voice, and he has a kind voice. I mean, there's so much information about who this guy is when I hear his voice. And if he were, sometimes his emails kind of piss me off because all I'm seeing is the words. But whenever I've talked to him in person, I can come back to saying, hey, I love this because we really disagree and I really like this guy. And so much of that is just as you say, the humanizing power of the voice.
Right. I really do. I believe that audio is one of the big things the internet overlooked. We forgot about talk shows and call-in shows. We forgot about, the radio. And I think that maybe the pandemic made us remember because everyone was trapped at home and just they didn't want to stare at their screen constantly, but they wanted to be connected to the wider world. And so I think maybe that gave us the nudge to remember that audio is good.
Yeah, I think that's right. There was a bit of serendipity there. Well, you have relaunched Noahpinion and taking advantage of Substack. Is it a blog or a newsletter or both, or is there some kind of a new word that is going to emerge out of it seems like a lot of people are transitioning to Substack, and I imagine there are other platforms like it. But what's happening to the whole predominance of the idea of the blog post or the blog?
Well, Substack is just a blog that also has an email newsletter. A newsletter just means people get email. Mm-hmm. I think the newsletter format of writing a slightly longer art blurb at the top about something and then a whole bunch of short blurbs, that has proven to be less interesting. And whenever I write posts that are like that, I lose email subscribers almost immediately. I can stick stuff at the bottom of posts, like little short takes, but then people tend to complain about them. People really just want op-eds. That's what they want. And I can provide that because I love writing opinions on things, analysis of things. Even if I don't have a strong opinion, I just love writing about stuff and can do it, at a high volume. And in fact, I still write for Bloomberg. I essentially have 2 writing jobs now, and it's fine. I'm finally able to write as much as I'd like, almost as much as I'd like, because I have to say, for every one post that I write, I get approximately 1.5 post ideas.
In the process of writing it, or based on feedback you get?
Throughout the day, I auto-generate ideas. Reading Twitter for 1 hour will generate at least 3 ideas for posts, each of which takes at least, an hour and a half to 3 hours to write.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's just, yeah.
Well, if a good percentage of those 3,000 people that signed up for the email shifted to subscribing, paying the money, and you're able to kind of lower the percentage of free. Basically, is there a scenario where you would make enough money through Substack and the newsletter that you would give up the Bloomberg opinion position?
Bloomberg's a great job. I love my colleagues, and I reach an audience there that I can't reach otherwise.
Right.
It would provide, job security in case that Bloomberg decides to roll up its opinion division. Every employee in America has now learned that employers make big changes that result in you getting laid off. It happens. Yeah. I think that also, to be honest, I'm one of Bloomberg's top writers, and I don't want to give that up.
Yeah.
There's a ton of people who just read me through Bloomberg, and I get lots of respect as an opinion writer that way that I would not have as just a Substack blogger. So while it's a good fallback in case Bloomberg decides to roll up its opinion division, Bloomberg is way too good of a gig to give up.
Yeah. Well, and they work really well together because you get sort of some stature from Bloomberg. It's a different kind of a platform. You probably are going to get some financial security from the blog if it continues to succeed. And
hopefully.
Why give up either one of them?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I write about different things. Like Bloomberg, I write mostly about policy. Just evaluate, and mostly, news-based stuff. For the blog, it's just much more expansive. I can just write about, culture or politics and things that I'm not even allowed to write about for Bloomberg. And I can just write in a funny voice if I want. I'm not that funny a person, but occasionally I try to be a little funny. So, yeah.
Well, and Bloomberg hasn't asked you to use a pseudonym for the blog for fear that if you get too wild and crazy there, it'll taint the sort of august stature of their opinion network.
No, they haven't. And in fact, they didn't even request that on Twitter. The one thing they requested on Twitter was that I not insult people too much. I'm pretty nice on Twitter, as Twitter people go, which still makes me seem mean to a large number of people. But I at one point I said I got into a fight with a powerful political operative, a powerful campaign operative, who I had criticized the hiring practices of that operative's boss on Twitter. And he saw it and got really mad and called up Bloomberg and just got really angry. And they said, no, you don't insult people on Twitter. I was like, okay. I didn't even think I had insulted the guy. It was just, he's touchy. But otherwise Bloomberg has been incredibly tolerant of me saying essentially whatever risque things. I'm not a very risque person. I just don't naturally have a lot of takes or opinions that are gonna make a huge swath of the populace mad. And in a way that's lulled me into a false sense of security, because on the occasion where I do have something that makes people mad, I'm always a little bit surprised. I'm not used to it,
Well, do you think you made Larry Summers mad?
Oh, I hope so. Larry Summers needs to be a little bit mad, otherwise he can't be Larry Summers.
I saw you had some threads responding. Have you heard back from him? Are you going to invite him to a room on Clubhouse, or what's likely
Not
to
yet.
come of this?
Oh, I'd love to invite him to Clubhouse and have a debate.
That would be so cool. That'd be thousands.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
It's one problem being, so I'll try to get him to respond. I could also do a video debate with him and post it on my blog. Post it on Substack.
You mean a video debate if he would agree to talk to you on video and then just
if he would agree to talk to me on video, yeah. I don't think he will. He's I think he views himself as a bit Olympian in that regard. I don't know. But I was very astonished he responded to me on Twitter because he almost never does that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think he honored you, and I got to believe that results in a lot more people reading that column.
Oh, I hope so. But I think it's important to emphasize that practicing academic macroeconomists really backed me up on that column.
Yeah. Let's talk about the essence of that, too. Your piece in Bloomberg that he reacted to was on the attacks that he and others have made on the $1.9 trillion COVID stimulus bill, and the big issue being inflation. And I didn't have a chance to read your Bloomberg opinion column because although I'm willing to pay for your blog, I wasn't willing to pay for Bloomberg to get past the paywall. But I got the idea that you were saying even having this discussion about inflation could have some good effects, and that's what he said was naive. But how would you describe where you and Larry differ on this topic?
Well, it's hard to anticipate what Larry's point of view is. Larry for years was saying that there was that we were in a period of secular stagnation when we'd have essentially deflation unless we really made a vigorous attempt to spend a lot of money and get out of it. Now he seems to be reversing that really rapidly. So I don't really know what his opinion formation mechanism is or what mental model he's using. So I don't know what's going on with Larry. But my basic point was that the danger happens when the public concludes that policy is being made in a qualitatively different way than it used to be. And so if people think that policy is just responding to events, fine. But as soon as people decide, okay, now our government has changed such that Congress is going to spend to the moon and the Fed is going to accommodate them by financing all that spending, if people really come to believe that, then spending could cause more inflation in the future than it's caused in the past. So in the past, we had the CARES Act, no real inflation, stimulus, no real inflation, big deficits under Reagan, then under Obama to fight the Great Recession, then under Trump, and then big deficits but no inflation ever. So people might say, "Oh, we're safe. It never caused inflation." But if people, maybe that's because in the back of their mind, people always believed that there was some fundamental impulse toward austerity in the U.S. government, that our combination of partisan system or just the responsibility of the people in charge would restrain deficits if they got too far out of hand. And because of that, they didn't respond to big deficits by raising prices, by doing the kinds of things that you do when your government is just going to spend infinitely. And so maybe it was just because of people's beliefs in the regime. But then, but there's a possibility that what's happened is that the equilibrium has changed such that Democrats have become more willing to just swing for the fences on spending, to spend as much as possible, and that Republicans were always sort of willing to spend a lot under Republican presidents. And the people in general saw the CARES Act and whatnot and decided spending's always good. And deficits don't matter. And I mean, you really did see a change. Dick Cheney once said that he said Reagan-proved deficits don't matter. And but that was for the Republican Party. The Republican Party is only opportunistically hawkish when there's a Democratic president whom they want to stymie. But then if the Democrats were still sort of hanging on to the idea of fiscal responsibility, so that Clinton, even with a Democratic Congress, cut deficits dramatically. And Obama, he spent a lot in the first year or two, and then cut the deficit. He cut the deficit to very small, and the debt stopped going up as a percentage of GDP. It really flatlined. And Obama's part of that was the Tea Party, of course, but part of that was just because Obama had this sense of innate fiscal austerity, and you can say that hurt our country, probably a little bit. It did, but maybe people have decided that politics is different now, and that there's no adults in the room. No one's, the Republicans stopped being adults in the room with Reagan, and now the Democrats have stopped being adults in the room with Biden, and basically everyone believes in infinite deficits, and now the Fed has been completely cowed and is just going to keep interest rates low forever and finance whatever sort of spending and borrowing the government wants to do. And there we go. We're screwed. Head for the hills. Get your money out, and then inflation could happen. It's a worry, and I think that's what some of these guys, maybe not Summers, but Blanchard and some of the critics of this bill, I think that's lurking in the back of their mind, that fear.
Yeah.
That we could become like that.
Fascinating. Well, it's an odd situation for Summers to be so much on the outside of the big economic issues being debated, and that puts him in a different situation to speak out. Maybe that's all he thinks he can do to be the last adult in the room or something.
That's right. But, to a large extent, he's really no longer in the room. He has no position in the Biden administration. No one wanted to nominate him to the Fed. And his reservoir of goodwill with economists and people on the left has really run out. I feel like everybody's really mad at him all the time now. And this is a bizarre reversal for him, who complained about secular stagnation for so many years, to then say, okay, no, inflation's about to happen, just completely reverse. And so if we really want to reassure the public that there's no fundamental regime change that's going to send inflation to the moon, Summers is not the guy to do it, nor is Blanchard, whose cachet is primarily within academia. I think we need the Fed. Mm-hmm. I think the Fed is the only entity that can sort of credibly reassure the markets and the banks and companies that things will be gotten under control if they have to be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'd like to finish. One of the things you had in the Cancel Technology column that fascinated me was you talked about your general thesis of technology as being technology weirds the world, changing the world in unexpected ways, and then culture comes in to sort of deal with these changes and make them normal or fit our lives. And in some cases, our lives get better after that first shock of how technology weirds something. And I've been following the whole ebook thing in the Kindle for 12 years. And what the Kindle did to books was made reading weird. I mean, you can download books to your thing in 60 seconds, and everything about reading just was made odd and exciting and disruptive. And so now we've been 12 years out. Do you see your sort of technology thesis? How has culture or the way people think about books and publishing assimilated that shock of weirdness that the Kindle represented? And are we to the point where reading is now better than it was after a period of time when it wasn't clear if this would be a good thing for reading and books and publishing or not? Or how would you apply your overall technology thesis to what we've seen so far since 2007 and the introduction of the Kindle?
That's an interesting question. I still read paper books. I have not ever made the switch to ebooks because I don't like the way they look on the screen. I just don't like it. Also, of course, physical books make a nice room decoration.
Yep.
But I think that will lead to their enduring popularity. But then also, it's nice to be able to own your own book and not have DRM that someone else can revoke.
Right.
And so for that reason, I haven't really made the switch to Kindle. For me, what's been more transformative is audiobooks. And I listen to a lot of audiobooks in addition to reading paper books. And audiobooks completely change the experience for me. You can't skip ahead. You can't skim. Your idea of how things sound is mediated by the way that some narrator.
Yeah.
I read at different times. So like I'm quote unquote reading audiobooks while I'm, walking around or doing exercise or doing the dishes or doing chores or something like that, or commuting when there's no pandemic. And then, and that really transforms the experience a lot in addition to just the technological limitations and possibilities. So I think that's a big deal. I know we had audiobooks before, like Audible and phones and whatnot, but it was just harder.
Yeah.
Books on tape were always a thing. I don't know. So Kindle, I think the main thing that Kindle's changed is my ability to send people books. I'm more inclined to just mail people a Kindle single than I am to, or whatever, just ebook version, than I am to, buy them a physical book.
So kind of sharing of books and moving books around is something that probably there's been some increase in velocity there.
Right. Remember how you always lend out your paper books and then people wouldn't bring them back?
Yeah.
Just get them the Kindle. Get the Kindle version.
Exactly. Do you have Alexa, or is that another place that you're not quite on the bandwagon yet, or a smart speaker in your home?
No, I don't do Alexa. It's I find it. I have used it. I find it cumbersome. There's nothing I want to do with it necessarily that I can't just do with a button press.
A button pressing what button?
Well, it depends on what. I mean, if you want to, if you want to listen to music, I find it cumbersome to say, Alexa, play blah, 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 and then listen to Alexa sort through it. Yeah. I can just immediately go to a music thing and type it in, and then I have the music.
Yeah, yeah.
Or activating appliances. I mean, yes, maybe you could get up and like, you could say, Alexa, turn on the lights. But, you can also just install a thing where you can turn on the light with your phone.
That's right.
And so far, Alexa hasn't justified itself to me in terms of value proposition, or at least I haven't seen the use cases enough to really switch. I like to be an early adopter, but I tried it out a lot. It's interesting that you're picking technologies that I've sort of rejected. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting because so many things I do adopt.
Yeah,
and just not
like Clubhouse and yeah.
Right. And it was just some of these things like seem to add effort. You got coolness, but you had to spend more effort.
Yeah, yeah.
And
well, maybe there's the human makeup may have a limited amount of disruptive things that you can do at any one time, and you might have maxed out on Clubhouse and other things that you're early adopting. And there's some things I'm pretty much early adopting everything, but there are some things I just say, no, I haven't got time for that one. I don't want to learn it. It's just like there is some kind of a topping off where you have to just say, I bet it's cool, but it's not for me.
Instagram, I've never done Instagram.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just not hot enough for Instagram, to be honest. Anyway.
Well, this has been great. Anything else you'd like to mention about the newsletter or the upcoming projects that we could pass along to the listeners? Or
Well, I have a lot of interviews coming through the pipe. Patrick Collison, CEO of Stripe, Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, Shaikhat Chakrabarty, I should say, pronounce the name right. He discovered AOC.
Oh, wow.
And he was her chief of staff for a long time and wrote the original Green New Deal.
Now, are these recorded interviews that people can listen to, or they're going to be written where he says, I see. Yeah.
Some are one, some are the other.
I got it.
That's right. David Shore is a political analyst. So a lot of interviews coming up, and then I just have a lot of sort of things to write about. I may start paywalling more posts just to make sure that if people become oversubscribed to Substack, I want my Substack to be one of the ones that they subscribe to instead of the ones they decided not to.
Well, yeah, I think that's a wise choice. And I think you've got a moment where there ought to be a significant number of people to be willing to subscribe. So you wouldn't want to miss that kind of an opportunity.
I've just got to get the distribution. I've got to figure out how to reach all the people out there and find who's interested in this kind of writing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Kevin Kelly did his bit, and I'm sure there'll be others.
Yeah. He helped a lot, yeah.
Good.
Anyway.
I have been speaking with Noah Smith, a Bloomberg opinion columnist and the author of Noahpinion, a newsletter and blog available for subscription at noahpinion.substack.com. Thanks very much, Noah.
Thank you so much. It was great to be on.
After my conversation with Noah, which I realized I had chosen a way too early start time for my Clubhouse conversation tomorrow, I rescheduled the room for 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you're a Clubhouse member, I hope that you'll drop by and join the discussion of his ideas. I think by changing the time, there's a chance that he might stop by and say hi. I'm not sure. He is on Clubhouse. I find Noah's thought process to be compelling because he is not anxious about things he doesn't know. After we finished the recording, he read me a partial list of the ideas that he has jotted down for future Noahpinion posts, and it's clear he is not going to run out of topics anytime soon. That's good news for his subscribers. You can sign up for a monthly subscription for $10 a month or $100 a year. I'll have a link in the show notes to his site. The URL is Noahpinion, that's spelled NOAHPINION.substack.com. Highly recommended. That's it for this week. Next week's guest will be Dean Koontz, who has another new novel coming out. It's called, the title is The Other Emily. I'm about a third of the way through it. It's a gripping story with a lot of Dean Koontz elements. I really have become a fan of the way he writes and the interpersonal dramas that he sets up. Some of it's still tough. I mean, his bad guys are really bad, and there's no sugarcoating that. But this one's also a mysterious and sweet love story, so I can't wait to see how it turns out. That novel is available for pre-order with release on March 23rd. A week from next Friday, that would be March 3rd, I will have an interview with C.J. Box, author of Dark Sky. That's book 21 in the Joe Pickett series, available for pre-order with release March 2nd, 2021. I'm really looking forward to talking to C.J. Box because I was in Wyoming when he was in Wyoming. I think he grew up in Wyoming. I think Rollins, if I'm right. And I've been aware that he's had this tremendous career writing these mystery novels, the Joe Pickett series, but I've never met him, I don't think, and this will be a chance to compare some of our Wyoming notes with each other and also just to hear about his work in general. I've started reading that book, Dark Sky, and it's excellent. So I have 3 invites to Clubhouse, and if you would like one, just send me an email at podchronicles@gmail.com, and I will give those invites to the first 3 emails that come in requesting them. So if you have an invite, you'll be able to attend the room, which I'm going to create tomorrow, Saturday. That is February 20th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Should be fun. Thanks for listening.